What are the comments or questions for our speakers?
I have a question for Dr. Zapata, right? About the models. So you said that you had 4 models. How long do those models take? Is it like the whole semester?
Yeah.
Or?
So it's 1 per month, 1 module per month. So it's a 4 semester. Yeah. So it was a whole. I had planned on 5 units, but then I realized it was too ambitious. So that's why I have 4 modules, instead of 5. Yeah.
How do you deal with differences in proficiency in your heritage classes with those modules? How are they actually being assessed, I guess, is the question.
Well, they were assessed mostly, by, the persuasive, what I mean was like what I show you, applying appropriately and creatively. So they had the, let's say traditional kind of text that they have to write or they have to produce, and then also the hybrid one. And I have rubrics, that have to do with creativity, language use, and so the thing is that we had differences in proficiency, and then, but I did a lot of pair work, so they were, and then a lot of collaboration, and I did a lot in class too. So for example, with the hybrid projects, and what I didn't say is that they had to produce an e-portfolio with everything. So it was just, all the projects, so there were 8 projects total, and I should have shown you one of them. So it was an e-portfolio on Weebly, that's what they did. But it's a lot of work. I have to be honest with you. It's a lot of work giving them, comments, and then they creating the peer review activities, and so it was a lot of work. But yeah, that's the way I assess. I don't believe in discrete point tests. I don't do fill in the blanks and things like that. No, so I do.
Portfolio-based assessment.
Yes, portfolio-based assessment. Yes, e-portfolio. Yeah.
I honestly just have a question because you didn't get time to really finish out like a lot of your justification for some of the things in our big discussion. But so with your participants in your study, you divided by age. And they were kind of like rough boundaries and everything based on the makeup. But I just wanted to know if you did find any like interesting findings in terms of like the age of your participants and their experiences growing up, like bilingual in their school environment.
So there were 2 things. The half of the participants were from Texas, and the other half were from New York, besides the one who was from Australia. I did find some differences. The reason why I ended up breaking them up is because there have been some shifts in the ideas of what to do with bilingual students in those kind of 2 different groups, right? So there was the 18 to the 25-year-old group, and then the 26 to 36-year-old group. And it seemed that the older group had more violent reactions, right? So they had a harder time. So it did indicate that there was some improvements in what we're doing with bilingual students, although the younger ones kind of mirrored it in different aspects, right? So though it wasn't necessarily as physically violent and or verbally violent for the younger group, psychologically it seemed that it was just as damaging, being placed in the wrong courses or being told that their Spanish was incorrect or inappropriate or all of those kinds of things. But I think that the terminology that we use, I didn't really get to talk about that in terms of the implications, is really from hearing these experiences. What I wanted to take away from it was that the terminology that we use actually matters, right? So it seems like it's abstracted and it's academic and it's part of the exercise of what we're doing in trying to describe the linguistic systems that these students have, but that those things then affect the ideologies, which then psychologically affects the students and what they're doing and how they perform with their language.
So I'm a first-year Spanish teacher. I'm teaching Spanish 1 at a high school, and I have a pretty pretty diverse group of students in most of my classes that come from various backgrounds, some with varying exposure to Spanish. And I guess my question is, I'm hearing a lot of from the different panels today that about talking about how you talk about like Spanish and assessing its proficiency versus good Spanish and bad Spanish or whatever. So I guess the question that I have is, how do you assess proficiency in the language while not trying to create that binary of good Spanish versus bad Spanish in the classroom?
Yeah. The thing is that, I don't like talking about proficiency. I like talking about performance. So it's the whole idea, what your students can do in a particular situation, social situation. So that is, and then it's not a question of saying, it's correct or incorrect. It's effective or not effective in terms of, communication. So I wouldn't talk about proficiency in itself, because what you're doing, it's based, you are going to assess them based on what you are doing in class, no? So that's performance. So you are applying a particular methodology, you're teaching a particular set of concepts, and then what you want to see is how effective they are in applying those concepts in order to communicate in that particular social situation. And I don't think, in that case, I don't think you can talk about correct or incorrect by being effective or not effective. And I think I would suggest that you go with, ACTFL, and then meets expectations, exceeds expectations, almost meets expectations. So the whole idea is that you have these holistic, categories. And depending on the mode of communication, too. What are they doing? When you can have them use Spanish in the interpersonal mode, or the interpretive mode, or the presentational mode. So that's how I would go, and that's what I do in my program. This is how we do it. We don't talk about correct or incorrect. We talk about being effective or not. And then if you meet the expectations for your level of performance. Yeah? So it's if it's novice high or novice mid or intermediate low, intermediate mid. So go with app. Yeah. And I'll be happy to give you the rubrics and everything soon. All the materials will be available, but not for now because we're using. But we have some things, yeah.
I wanted to add a little bit to that too. One of them was to use already existing rubrics and things like that, because as a teacher, I know that this can be time consuming. The better methods of educating students in language are often very time consuming and not necessarily institutionally practical. And you obviously have to work within your system that you're given as well. So I think that it's really important to kind of assess what your students are able to do in the same way that Dr. Zapata was talking. And so really kind of building tasks that are around being able to do things. Like, are your students able to effectively go to the grocery store? Is this the kind of thing that they can do with their language? So what kinds of things can your students produce that means that they're able to use the language to communicate in different ways, right? In different modes and in different social situations and all of that. But to use those rubrics and kind of things that already exist so as to save yourself time, not reinventing the wheel, because some of these things exist. Hopefully we'll be able to have access to them more and more as time goes on. Right.
I guess I would just add to that maybe I agree very much with what Gabriela is saying, what Aris said, but in terms of correct and incorrect, and that I do think there's an important distinction that has to be made between what's correct or incorrect from a popular social dialectal sense, like aya, and what's correct or incorrect from a sort of canonical, like saying teniera, when you meant to say tendría, tenía, or tuviera. So I could have all those in those examples I gave of Cubans, right? Those are popular social dialectal variants. Hypothetical future, yo tenía, yo tendría, yo tuviera, right? But yo teniera, that I mean, I don't know if I would. Gabriela, what would you say to that? Do we say to a student that that's incorrect? I think I would probably say that. I don't know.
I wouldn't. I mean,
you wouldn't.
No.
Getting people to kind of explain their process of what they mean or what their processes are is also a communication task, right? And then people are defending and trying to decide what are negotiating meaning, and that is what we're trying to do with language in the first place, right? And then we're seeing, we can assess, right? Because we see what knowledge they have and what kinds of things we can add to their communicative ability.
So you wouldn't make any sort of distinction between popular social dialectal variants versus
I do. In my
grammatical
classrooms.
kinds of forms.
I do in my
I take
classes.
issue with
I do
No.
in my classes. I do.
I think it depends on what your particular focus is at the moment. Because, I mean, I agree with you that if you're trying to, I mean, if the objective of your class is to develop their academic Spanish, you need to say that. You have to, exactly. But if it is in a situation in which, they are expressing their opinion in class, I would not correct that. But I would talk about, I mean, for example, I mean, if that is the focus of instruction, of course, you want to draw attention to that.
Especially in institutional confines, right? So if you're working within a system where they're going to be tested or they're going to be responsible for producing certain forms, then you definitely have to point that out.
But it's a question of register, and then it depends on the situation. But yes, yeah. But it's kind of cool that they are saying that, no?
Just a quick comment on that. I think that I just kind of approach that the way I would approach a child that's first learning, whether it's English or Spanish. And when they make because that's an error, I think, with not really knowing what the STEM is, but just repeat it back in conversation. So that at least at that moment they can hear it. I mean, I'm not teaching it at that moment, but just the modeling at that second. Just
always hear it though.
Yeah.
No, that's why you have to, especially.
I think I'm some sort of mad prescription.
No.
That recasting doesn't necessarily.
Exactly. But that's the whole point, And I also think that, especially with heritage speakers, I mean, it doesn't work because that's not the way they learn Spanish, So you have to, I think you have to connect it to meaning and then try and guide them, and that's why, I was showing you the whole idea of having text enhancement and then making sure that they see that and then analyzing a particular the particular form in terms of meaning. I mean, and then once you go like, oh, okay, what is this? Oh, okay, so this is the imperfect subjunctive, and okay, why do we use? I mean, what is the author trying to say here, and how do we use it, and how do we form it? But then through meaning, I think we have to go through meaning instead of because recasting. I don't think because I mean they're not used to. It's still being studied. Yes.
Well, actually, I didn't have a question. I was just following up on the comments and what you were discussing about. Just wanted to add, the way I will approach something like that will be like I have worked in a full immersion environment, and for us it's very important to keep the child very open and willing to share what he or she knows. So in order not to cut first that the train of thought, and second, in order not to create a barrier for them to limit what they want to say and to feel like I'm not saying it right, I better don't say anything. The way I approach it, and I have seen it work most of the time, is that I will let them finish what they thought, and I will rephrase exactly what they say, but in the correct way. And then I will use that as a moment and the following question for them would be, why do you say that instead of this? There are some students who question that. And so that's a perfect time for me to start talking about, the reason is this. And this is, you can use it, but this is the correct, not really the correct, but this is the way that we do it. This is the grammatically way that we express this thought.
I think what's very important for us as instructors is what Dr. Lynch said, is to understand the difference of, and I'll use the example in English that I read in a book, and I can't remember the author's name now, but it ain't gonna work. Okay? It ain't gonna work. That's dialectal form, and it's acceptable in certain contexts, and it's fine. Now, if someone said he goed instead of he went, okay, we need to correct that. That's not a dialectal or social or any kind of variation. So, and we need, as instructor, we need to understand the difference of those two. Okay, that's how I do it.
What that also means for us as instructors is that we have to be aware of variation, right? We have to really kind of verse ourselves in what variational forms exist, right? So that we know that we're not privileging or unprivileging, or we know what situations we need to actually speak on.
Yeah.
Sorry, she had.
No, it's okay. I mean, it's just been like the same thing over and over, but it's about that concept of acquiring this sort of bidialectalism and emphasizing it that way in the classroom, right? So if you have a student that's saying, well, I don't use this term or I don't use this structure, say it's, and that's what Gabriela said earlier too, is that you can say, yes, it's fine that you use it in that context. That's your home dialect. This is just as valid. It's the same as how we speak our own dialects of English, but are taught in the classroom from an early age that we're supposed to write in a certain way and, not behave, but, have this certain register in an academic setting. So that can be transferred as well to the classroom. This is acceptable in some contexts, and then in others, we have to adopt this certain framework.
And creating spaces for them to do both inside of your classroom, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'll just add one more thing, and then we'll go on to the next topic. I think I was I've never taught elementary school or high school or anything. I've only ever been in the university environment, so I don't know what children and high schoolers do or ask, honestly, and I don't have children. But at least in the university setting, I remember when I first, started teaching Heritage Spanish like 20 years ago or something, I was kind of shocked that this is at University of Miami. I was kind of shocked that so many students in the class demanded for me to tell them cuál es la forma correcta. Like, yo sé que puedo decir esto, yo sé que puedo decirlo, yo sé que mis padres dicen esto, pero usted que profesor, díganos por favor cuál es la forma correcta. So like, push you against the wall. So I think another kind of, it's not all the class, but there's a segment, at least in the university setting. I don't imagine small children doing this, but high school students do also? Okay. So I think it's important also, probably, right, Gabriela can speak to this more than I can, and Ari certainly, kind of develop, because no one had told me this would be coming at me. And I wasn't sure strategically how to respond to not fall back into this trap of, I'm the professor here to dictate what's correct and what's incorrect. And I don't know what the good... Gabriela, do you have advice on that?
No, I have the I'm
me too.
I'm the actress here, with the microphone and everything. It's that what I always say is like, I say, well, first of all, I tell them from the very beginning, there's no correct, or incorrect. I tell them, it depends on what you want to say and in which context. And if they tell me, I say, what you're saying is correct. If you want to use that word for that particular social, situation. But then if you want to write, I always tell them that if you want to write, this will be the rule, But I always tell them, you have to be proud of your Spanish, you have to be,
But it's exactly what I said. Those students who want to know what is correct have internalized these ideologies, right? They've internalized.
And it's so sad.
Because I still go back to that grammatical issue.
Yeah.
But no
one would say that anywhere in the Spanish.
Yes, but that's a difference between something like an aiga, or if they're asking which one's correct, because they do ask that, right? They say which one is correct, aiga or aya. But that one, in that case, you have to say, in what situation are we talking about? Things like that.
That one word for me is natural to use in my context, but for Mexico is grosería. Okay, una grosería. So I explained it to him, which was the meaning of the word, and which was the meaning for me. And he said, "No, Miss Cárdenas, I'm sorry. In Mexico, you are very disrespectful." And say, "Apologize for that." But that I'm trying to do is teach you that one word for one country could be natural word. It doesn't have any bad meaning, but for other cultures it is.
Yeah.
So that I want you to learn is in which content you are able to use the word, because you could be offending somebody. That's the only thing. But right now I say, okay, yeah, that's correct. You can use it in this situation, in this situation, in this situation. Unfortunately, we depend on a test, and they are going to ask them for this word on the test.
No, I understand.
So for that particular word, so I have to tell them, this one is okay, this one is okay, this one is okay, but on the test you need to memorize this.
And that's,
I'm sorry, unfortunately I have to tell them that.
So,
but when they are speaking, they are able to use whatever they want.
yeah, but and that's what I was telling my students the other day, because I mean, of course, I was presenting Learning by Design, my methods class, and we are, we are lucky enough, at the university level, and also, I'm very lucky because I have a wonderful head of the department. I mean, my department head, unfortunately, she's on leave this year, and I am already trying to kill myself. I mean, and she's allowed me to create this program, and then. And I see, how what I say, you may say, oh, but this cannot be applied. But at least, if it gives you a little bit of, if it starts thinking, it can help you a little bit, maybe perhaps not for everything that you do in your classroom, but something, that is a small part of your class, something that, that's the whole idea. But one day, I wanted to emphasize the whole idea of context, appropriateness and all that. And then, of course, we were talking about, I said, because I wanted them to understand what is appropriate and inappropriate. And this is going to be recorded, but remember, I'm not from Mexico, I'm from Argentina. So I said, okay, chicos, lo que es apropiado y lo que no es apropiado, ¿no es cierto? Por ejemplo, para mí la palabra chingada. And they were like, oh! And I said, but it doesn't mean anything to me. I said, it's okay. I said, to me. But they understood the difference between the dialects and all that. But I kept saying, and they were, but it didn't, they said, it doesn't mean anything to me. It doesn't have any kind of value. What? No, I said, I can't, and I wrote it on the blackboard, and I said, I can't say this because it has, but
I have to add that we were talking about the Mexican bread.
Yeah.
One time she said, that kind of bread that I cannot say.
No, I cannot say, exactly.
Solo un comentario en español, porque a mí me pasó lo opuesto. Estaba yo en una clase y me dice una alumna al final, yo dije, estaba explicando que ojalá que haya mucha...
Sí.
Y al final la alumna me dijo, perdone maestra, pero es que usted se equivocó. Le digo, ¿qué? Dice, es que no se dice haya tal, aiga. Ajá. Ella me corrigió a mí. Entonces yo ya le expliqué, fuimos a los verbos, pero lo opuesto, y ella estaba segurísima. Ella toda su vida había escuchado el aiga. Claro. Entonces yo explico el haya, y entonces ya, así como que dijo, la maestra se equivocó. Son fabulosos, son estudiantes fabulosos.
So I guess the only thing left to do is give a big round of applause to our speakers.